I have a real problem supporting 30 or 40,000 more troops and $100 billion more a year for that war on top of what we're spending in Iraq.
Well, I'd like to have an endeavor to see if we can cut current spending and find some dollars that we're spending today to pay for the war and prioritize America's spending.
Well, that just gives you a little taste of President Obama's bipartisan problem on Afghanistan.
You've got political costs, you've got economic costs, you've got budget costs. We'll talk about it all. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABCNews.com's Top Line. I'm David Chalian.
And I'm Rick Klein.
Each weekday, we're bringing you the very latest political headlines, reporting, insight, analysis, everything you need and want to know about politics.
And be part of the conversation all day long via Twitter. It's twitter.com/TheNote. Let us know what you think.
Kick us out of our holiday funk, sir. What is your top line today?
No funk for me. Obama's war. President Obama begins laying out his case for an increase in troops in Afghanistan. The big address is going to happen tomorrow night. We're getting more hints of what's likely to be the centerpiece of a very hectic week where he's going to be talking about his new strategy for Afghanistan. If he didn't own this war before, he will now, and he's got to sell a skeptical public and a skeptical Congress on the broad outlines.
It's fascinating to watch, Rick, because 3 years ago, we were sitting here in this place debating a rock surge that George Bush was putting forward, and it's starting to sound very similar to that in what we expect to hear from him on Afghanistan. Of course, with his party in control of Congress, the public debate may play out somewhat differently. Foreign and domestic, Rick was saying it's going to be a hectic week. It is indeed a huge week. One Rahm Emanuel, the White House chief of staff, called a momentous week within a momentous year. You've got the war, you've got health care being debated on the Senate floor, and you've got jobs, which politically is the most salient issue that this White House needs to deal with. So after he lays out his war strategy, President Obama is then going to host this job summit later in the week, then head out on the road to try to sell the jobs in sort of a White House road tour. And this indeed may be a tipping point of a week in terms of how this first year for Obama gets assessed.
As big as they come, you know, early on, one of the knocks we heard on the President Obama, you're trying to do too much too soon. Well, so many of those things actually didn't get done at the time that they get pushed out, and there's a very full plate that has to happen this week and for the rest of 2009. HUCK'S heat. Can you say Willie Horton, that shooting suspect out in Washington State who's alleged to have killed 4 police officers, has ties to Mike Huckabee? It turns out that he was released under the program that Mike Huckabee was overseeing as governor. He had his sentence commuted. Among many people that Huckabee commuted sentences. He put out a statement yesterday blaming the criminal justice system, not just in Arkansas, but also in Washington State. We saw Mike Huckabee say over the weekend, unlikely to run for president. If he were to run for president, you know this would be a major issue.
It's that last point that you just made, though, that's being lost, I think, in this story about Huckabee. He did say it's less than likely that he's running. I don't think he looks like a 2012 contender right now. It doesn't seem to be on his radar. Whether or not Roger Ailes renews his contract at Fox after this might be actually the bigger conversation than really the political impact on a potential non-presidential candidate. And protecting the president. Yes, days later, that state dinner party crashing affair is still very much in the news. Now, being called up to Capitol Hill for some testimony, the Secret Service is going to be hauled up there to talk about how this could possibly have happened. You have both Democrats and Republicans alike concerned that the Secret Service, there was a failure somewhere along the way here, clearly. And even though it ended up just being a state dinner party crash, that something far more serious could have taken place potentially.
And if those crashers want to sell their story, they better do it before it all airs on C-SPAN on Thursday, if indeed they are called. And crashers of the world, you should also know something else for your radar screen. Chelsea Clinton is engaged.
Crashers of the world. Okay, we're going to begin with the healthcare debate that hits the Senate floor today. We're joined by Ezra Klein of the Washington Post. There are a few people who follow the healthcare debate as closely as Ezra. Ezra, I want to begin, if I may. It seems that as this debate now takes to the Senate floor, the more important action is actually happening behind closed doors, not on the Senate floor, in Harry Reid's office. And so let's begin with that all-popular public option that is the heat of the controversy always in this debate. And answer this question for me. If 4 moderate Democrats say they're not going to pass anything that has a public option, and 2 or more liberals say they're not going to pass anything that doesn't have a public option, which side do you expect to get rolled? Who's going to win that debate?
The liberals will lose it, I think. And in particular, I could be wrong, but I don't know if any liberals have actually made the very firm I will simply not vote. I will vote for a filibuster on anything that has a public option. Look, right now what they're trying to do is have both sides vote for the bill with some sort of compromise where everybody can say they won. And that's going to be very, very hard to do. There are a lot of compromises out on the table right now, and it turns out we're getting even more. Tom Carper, the senator from Delaware, has something new that he's cooking up alongside Chuck Schumer, where it would be a national insurance option that would be ready on day one and that would compete with private insurers but would not be run by the government, sort of a very, very strong form of a co-op. But nobody's calling it that because nobody likes to talk about co-ops, so they were very unpopular. So this is going to be complicated. Although one thing I would just note on it, if you had talked to me 6 months, 8 months ago, and you had said, tell me where we'll be 8 months from now, I would said, well, you got 60 Democrats, you got a couple moderates in there, the public option is very controversial. At the end game, they're going to say, you know, they're going to force a concession on that. And so it's amazing how much this has been very structurally decided. You would have known we were here if you had tuned out for the last 8 months.
Yeah, and Ezra, you had a smart posting on your blog on that subject this morning that essentially this has played out how anyone would have guessed 6 or 8 months ago. But that's despite all these efforts to try to sell the public on health insurance reform. President Obama made the case umpteen times, publicly, privately, trying to twist some arms, trying to make things happen, and yet you've seen no movement. That to me seems critical because we know where this is still going to be headed. But do they have any more bullets left in the chamber, or anything else that they can do to try to advance something that hasn't advanced yet?
I mean, what's interesting to me is that it does seem like it has advanced. What I think the more surprising thing is you haven't seen a collapse, right? August didn't really matter. You've got a lot of these issues, Social Security privatization or Clinton in '94 both being good examples, where over time, as you let this stuff sort of sit out there in the sun of Congress for a while, it just rots. I mean, all that you hear is controversy and people yelling about death panels. And honestly, when there's no death panels in the bill, obviously, but when you're having that in the conversation, to most people, they think, you're going to pass a bill where people are legitimately arguing about whether or not there are death panels in there. So the fact that things have been as steady as they've been is actually, I think, the larger surprise to me. As for momentum, you know, this thing just rolls forward. You know, what we're really seeing here is that what decides it are votes on the Hill. So, you know, the polls have been very steady for a number of months now, and it passed the House by a little bit. It moved past its first cloture vote in the Senate, and it just sort of keeps steadily, gradually moving forward. What I'd really liken it to at the end is going to be stimulus here. I think that you're going to have it pass, but I think that by the end of it, nobody's going to like it all that much. That over time it will be judged a success, but when it happens, liberals are going to be furious about their concessions. Republicans will be angry about how much it spends. But, you know, it's one of these things where the legislative process, I think, makes everybody not like everything.
Forget the partisans up on the Hill, whether they'll like it or not in the end once it's all said and done for. How about the American consumer? Do you sense that the way the bill is currently structured, Ezra, that there are going to be instantly noticeable enhancements to our health care?
There are a couple of instant ones having to do with insurance market regulations, consumer advocates, some stuff in Medicare that's more serious, but very little happens before 2014. But right before I came down here, if I seem agitated, the reason is that the Congressional Budget Office
You don't seem agitated.
released a very, very important report on what's going to happen to the premiums under the plan in 2016. And the report was surprisingly, unequivocally positive for this bill. What they basically said is there are three markets. There's a large group market, which most of us are in. Premiums are going to go down there by about 1.5%. The smaller group market, premiums go down by a little bit less, about 0.5%. But the real big change happens in the individual market, which is where most of the uninsured are, where most of the real problems happen. And there, this is going to get complicated. You're going to hear this a lot in the next week or two. Premiums go up by 10 to 12%, but here's why. First, insurance gets a lot better. In fact, it gets so much better that you would expect premiums to go up by much, much more, about 25 to 30%. But then you add in that the pool gets healthier, young people, healthy people come in and buy insurance, and then it becomes much more efficient. And both of those things together save about 20%. So you end up with a slight increase for much, much, much better insurance. And then when you add the subsidies, people are actually going to be paying a lot less than they otherwise would be. I mean, it really was striking how much of the effect on the premiums is actually going to be when you put everything together.
Right.
They've done a good job designing this bill.
Ezra Klein, we're going to let you get to that CBO report. Thank you so much for being here today, sir.
Thank you.